Good afternoon and welcome to another A-Push video with Mr. Pate. Today we are looking at Manifest Destiny, kind of the origins of Manifest Destiny. The essential questions we have for today are, why was the United States unwilling to annex Texas? I gotta get out of the way there. And what fueled Manifest Destiny? So let's begin. Alright, well, the Lone Star Republic. So in 1821, Mexico, a new nation, had invited to help settle the Texas area Americans who wanted to settle there. By 1829, they were demanding that they not have slavery and that they convert to Catholicism. Both things that the Protestant slave-owning people who had largely come from the east and the south to Texas, they were not super excited about either of those developments and largely ignored them. When they were not cooperative, Mexico cut off immigration and said no more settlement in here. It was still ignored in that way. Well, what you're going to see happen is eventually you have kind of this battle going back and forth, and when General Santa Anna tries to basically squash their will to resist, the Texans are going to declare independence, and this breaks out in the basically Texas War of Independence. This is going to end at the Battle of San Jacinto. Yes, you have Goliad, where the Texans get wiped out, get beaten badly, and then Alamo, where they're all basically massacred. Every single last person. Surrender was not an option. And so you have some defeats for the Texans, but eventually at San Jacinto, they capture Santa Anna and force him to sign a basically peace agreement acknowledging Texas's independence. Santa Anna, the Mexicans are not going to be excited about it, and here's one of the controversies that goes with that. This was the area bordering at the Nueces River that Mexico had granted in their mind, even though they still rejected and wanted Texas back. But the Texans claimed this larger border and said, well, this is all Texas. And you can see that's a vastly larger tract of land that's going to be out there. Now, the United States had happily bought up the Louisiana Purchase, had purchased Florida from Spain, had settled kind of the boundary, had mutually agreed to settle Oregon country. So you might be thinking, well, of course the United States is going to be thrilled to welcome Texas in. So why would they not? Okay? Why were they unwilling to annex Texas, as our central question says? Simply because of this. You had the same amount of states in the north and the south, slave and free, and those states had a perfect balance in the Senate. The north already had a larger population in the House of Representatives, and both the North and the South did not want to see themselves lose the balance in the Senate. And things were perfectly equal. You may remember with the Missouri Compromise, this was a huge factor there. Missouri could not come in and upset that balance. Well, that's only 15 years later, that 16 years later, we're looking at the Texas issue. So Texas ends up sitting out there on its own as the Lone Star Republic for about 9 years. And really, there are going to be a couple of factors that will eventually bring Texas in to the United States. Number one is going to be the British are going out of their way. They're trying to woo Texas to join them, basically, and saying they'll protect them. Texas wants, these are Americans, so they want to be with the United States, but they also want protection from Mexico, and they fear more Mexican army attacks. They want that protection and recognition, because surely Texas would not be attacked if it was recognized as part of the United States. Well, Mexico threatens that if the United States annexes Texas, that could be war. So the United States is not interested in that. Jackson and later Van Buren and then John Tyler are all going to be wanting to avoid explosive issues that could bubble up. So they don't want to do that because there's no partner state to come in for Texas. So for these reasons, the United States doesn't annex Texas for a long time. So why do they eventually annex Texas? Essentially, they're going to do it when they get to a point where they fear that it will join Britain. And Manifest Destiny, as we'll see in a minute, sweeps America away. Polk has already been elected on that. Tyler wants to have some kind of accomplishment after a pretty disastrous presidential term. And so he's going to annex before leaving office after, Polk has been elected, but he's still the president-elect. He annexed, basically gets it to work through a joint resolution that Texas has brought in at that point. So how do we get this idea of Manifest Destiny? Well, there had been this concept of the Great American Desert. And this came from some expeditions that had happened between 1804 and 1820. And you remember in you had 1804 and after the Lewis and Clark expedition coming all the way up to Oregon, where I'm from. And they surveyed a large part of this area. Well, you also had other people, Pike and Long are going to be two other explorers sent out, and they survey up in here and then down around in what was Mexico at the time. And the word that came back was that this area where Mexico was at the time, which at that time was still Spain, this was unsuitable, that it was not good for farmland, and it was basically a wasteland. This is also why Jackson sends the Native Americans, the Cherokees, and other 5 civilized tribes, Creeks, Seminoles, etc., to what becomes Oklahoma, because he considers it to be, all the land over here to the west was considered to be Great American Desert. Well, people now know Texas has some good land, and other things come about now by the early 1840s. Sailors have gone up and discovered that the West Coast has several great ports in like the Bay Area and Puget Sound. It has incredibly fertile land in Northern California and all of the western parts of Oregon and Washington, especially the Willamette Valley, which is mainly in Oregon. Some of the most fertile farmland anywhere. Well, you have all these people who are over here in the east, and we'll talk about Frederick Jackson Turner before too long, but he basically says that there's always been a moving frontier coming west, and people, this helped. One of the things he says is this helped to stop clashes and problems in the east. It was a pressure reliever because people who were dissatisfied, they weren't just stuck where they were at, they could always move west. Well, you have people wanting to seek their fortune. You have immigrants coming in, you have people who are dissatisfied, and they want to move west. And now they hear there's great land here, there's good land in Texas, and they start to say, whoa, there's a lot of great land over here. And so this fuels this idea of moving out to the west. Well, this has some implications. With Oregon country. Oregon country had been mutually settled by agreement by Great Britain and the United States. It goes up to the southern border of Alaska. It was done to kind of pinch out the Russians who were trying to claim land down there. And now really you're going to have Americans desperately wanting all of this land. So this is where you're going to hear Polk talking with the Mexican-American War video about 54-40 or fight next time. So Oregon country setting up is kind of another thing. So you have the annexation of Texas happens, Americans want Oregon country, and now you're going to have Southerners wanting, so this is Northerners wanting Oregon country and to move west, but you're going to have Southerners wanting more of what is Mexico's land that becomes the Southwest United States of today. So this concept of manifest destiny is this term coined by John O'Sullivan. Americans come to believe they have a great culture, they have the best democratic republic, the longest running one. They believe that they have the right religion that they want to share with others. And they believe that it's God's destiny for America to really be this kind of sea to shining sea, coast to coast, great country. And these things are all going to fuel this concept of manifest destiny, which we'll learn more about next time with Polk and the Mexican-American War. But that's all the time we have for today. Stay classy.